Thank you. Welcome everyone to the second session this morning in the cross-functional room. This morning's presentation is Bevan
Rudge.
Bevan Rudge. I was going to get that wrong, wasn't I? New Zealand. He's doing a presentation on jQuery for designers and beginners. Just in the other rooms at the moment, we've got the fields, wizards and formatters, and that's widgets, not wizards. 0 to 6 Drupal websites in 6 months, and Drupal framework to accredited business success. But anyway, in this room, the cross-functional room, Bevan Rudge with jQuery for designers and themers. Thanks.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you all here. So I'm Bevan. I'm a Drupal consultant and developer at Previous Next. Been doing Drupal for a number of years. If you want to follow along with these slides, there's a lot of links in them to various useful websites. So you can get the slides at that URL, tinyurl.com/jQuery-designers. And that URL will keep working later as well as now. So yeah, I've been at Previous Next for several months now. Before that, I worked at a number of different Drupal shops and Drupal website companies, Palantir.net, Now Public, Examiner, Civic Actions. I'm not a designer. I'm primarily a developer, but I've done mostly front-end development, but also back-end development more recently. I love working with JavaScript and jQuery, and that's partly why I'm excited to be able to help other people along to learn jQuery. Do you want me to lift it up or to speak up? Speak up, okay. So in this session, we're going to talk obviously about jQuery, what sort of things you can do with it, how you can make websites more interesting, more interactive, and enhance the user experience of the site visitors. We're going to show you how to actually do it. We're going to look at some code and write a bit of code. We're also going to look at jQuery UI, which is not part of jQuery itself, but very closely connected to it. And that helps you do even more interesting and interactive things with jQuery quickly and easily without programming experience. We're also going to look at how to keep your website accessible even though you're using JavaScript and jQuery on your website. We're not going to be learning programming or doing programming per se. While it is programming what we'll be doing, I don't expect you to need to be a programmer or have programming experience to get value out of this session. We won't be looking at PHP code, barely at all, or definitely not module development, definitely not JSON or AJAX or JavaScript that integrates with server-side functionality. So just to get a rough idea of where we're at with this group to try and help keep things useful for the people that are here, I'll get you to all stand up, please. And as we go through each of these things, if you don't know what they are, you're not familiar with them, then just sit down. So HTML elements, I'm assuming that everyone's familiar with the first few. HTML attributes for those elements. CSS selectors, such as the ones here. So that's good. That's the base for what you need for the session to be useful. Functions. Okay, everyone's still standing, mostly. Variables. Okay. Objects and arrays. A few more people sitting down. And the concept of assignment, assigning a value to a variable. Okay, so it looks like everyone can sit down now. Looks like we're a more advanced group than what I normally do this session with, which will mean that I'm going to ask you to push me along with questions and challenge me to keep this at a level that's interesting for you. And if we go too far, for those of you that are not familiar with those programming concepts, don't forget to slow me down or ask me to repeat things or explain things in more detail.
Can you put that
It was tinyurl.com/jQuery-designers. So on that note, ask questions as we go if it makes sense, if you feel inclined. Please wait for the microphone if you can so that it can be captured on the recording. If it doesn't get into the microphone, please ask me to repeat the question. I'll probably forget to repeat it, so remind me. I'll also stop now and then and check if there's questions as we go. Yep. Matt here's going to run the mic around for you all when we get to questions. There is a Drupal.org project with code that is very similar to what I'll be demonstrating today. It won't be exactly the same because we kind of make things up as we go a little bit in some places, but it'll have the same concepts demonstrated in it, and it has thorough comments so that explain the code, which can help to remind things from this presentation. That's at drupal.org/project/JQ4DAT. That's jQuery for designers and themers. Okay, so jQuery. jQuery is a library that extends the JavaScript language to make it really useful in the browser. Before the days of libraries like jQuery, JavaScript was extremely, extremely painful, in case it wasn't painful enough now, and making simple changes like hiding an element or animating an element required tens or hundreds of lines of code. That was extremely difficult and complex to write. So jQuery simplifies those complex things down to 1 or 2 lines of code. It's actually made up of 2 parts. A selector engine, which can understand CSS selectors to find an element on the page or in the DOM. The selector engine also supports XPath, which is, if you like, an alternate syntax for CSS, but it has different applications. So this snippet of jQuery code here is basically that first part of jQuery, the selector. It'll find an element on the page, and then after we found it, we can do things with it. For example, we can make the element slide up out of sight or fade in to the page and appear. Or we can append some more stuff, some more markup to the inside of that element. Which brings us to the second part, the part of jQuery that allows us to manipulate the DOM. Hide it, show it, add to it, duplicate it, move it, animate it, all of that sort of thing. So let's get into writing some jQuery. So this is actually Drupal 7, but it's using a custom. It's using the theme from the Drupal.org project, JQ4DAT, which uses the Garland theme as its base theme. So it looks like Drupal 6 because it looks like Garland, but it's actually Drupal 7. You can see here. And yes, this is the info file for my theme, JQ4DAT. It's just got 1 style sheet and 1 JavaScript file. The template.php file is essentially empty. This is all commented out. And our JavaScript and CSS files are empty at this stage. In the project, they're already populated, but that's what we're going to do now as part of the demo, go and write that code. So let's say, for example, we wanted to initially hide this element on the form. Let's go and work out what a good selector would be to hide it. So there's the input, but we don't want to hide the input. We actually want to hide its wrapper, this thing here. So let's pick one of these classes. This seems to be the most unique one because it's got the word mail in it, and this is an email address. Actually, first of all, I'm just going to check that this is getting added to the page, just to make sure we're not missing anything obvious. And so you can see that it's working. Yep, so that's there. Alert brings up that pop-up window, but I usually use console.debug for that sort of thing. Can you guys see that on the screen, or is that too small? It's pretty small, isn't it? Is that okay? Yeah. So console debug will output elements or text into the console of your web browser. In Chrome, that's fairly easy to find. In Firefox, I assume you're familiar with Firebug, which has something pretty similar. So we've got Hello World down here now. So that's there, that's working. What we need, though, is to work with Drupal.behaviors, which is where we can put any set of functionality that happens in JavaScript on the web page. So in Drupal 6, I would just be able to do that and put in my my custom jQuery here. In Drupal 7, however, things changed a little bit, and we need to do this. These curly braces are a shorthand syntax to create an object, which is the JQ4DAT property of this here. For those non-programmers, just remember this, or make a note of where to find this pattern, and you can pretty much copy and paste it for any use where you want to add a bit of jQuery to your theme. You'll need to change this each time you use it so that it's unique for every bit of functionality. And I'm going to give this a slightly better name because that's pretty generic. I'll make it hide email field. And then this is where we're going to put our custom code. In Drupal 7, you also have detach, but you almost never need it, and it's not really in the scope of what we're going to be talking about today, so ignore that for now. Okay, so attach, I already got the class before. No, I didn't. I copied it, and then I copied something else. So I'll go get that again. Elements, form item mail. So I'm just going to stick that in console debug and just check what comes out so we can verify that's working and experiment a bit. So we've got an error. Actually, I'm going to look at that in the console, which is a bit cleaner. $sign is not a function. That's because in Drupal 7, the $sign is not initialized with jQuery anymore. So there's a few different ways you can declare the $sign. You can use the $sign to access jQuery. My favorite one is simply this, because it's simple and quick and easy to write. There's a few others, one in particular which seems to be more popular, which involves wrapping the whole file. I find that quite ugly and verbose, but that's just preference. If I didn't want to do that, I could just replace this with the word jQuery. That would work fine as well. But since we're going to be using it a lot, it's convenient to make it accessible with that $sign. So let's test that again. No errors, but we've got this coming out to the command line, which is the jQuery object, and it has the element that I selected before. I'm going to add a couple of things to the selector, though. First of all, we need to include the context variable. And I can talk a bit more about that later, but it's getting a bit out of the scope of this session as well. But essentially, you just need to include it in all of your initial selectors in your custom jQuery. We're also going to add here something for the form element in case there's more than one form on the same page which has a mail item, so that we're only modifying the one in the user registration form. So I need to go check the ID for that form. Here's the form element, and the ID is user register form. So put that in there. And it's still selecting it, so I haven't broken anything by adding that, but I've made it a lot more specific so that it won't be too aggressive when it selects things. So we're just going to simply hide it for now. So now we've started modifying the page. You can see the form disappeared when I refreshed. But let's do a fade out for fun. So that was pretty quick. So I'll give it a number in here. This number's in milliseconds. So that is 10 seconds. So it's hard to see because it's so slow, but that is actually fading out. And if we look here, you can see the number changing of the opacity CSS variable. So that's what jQuery is doing. It's taking, by calling the fade out function with that time, it goes and works out when it should change the opacity into what value. And by changing it frequently and decrementing it a little bit each time, it has the effect of fading it out. And jQuery makes all of that simple and abstracts all of that complex DOM manipulation into one simple function. Cool. Any questions at this point? Nope. Okay, so of course this isn't very useful because now you can't create an account even if you enter a username. You never get to enter the email address. So let's hack our form a little bit more and make it slightly less unusable. What I'm going to do is bind to this input element such that when you type something in, then the element that we've hidden reappears. So to do that, I need to find a selector for this element. It has an ID, so let's go with that. So again, same pattern as before. We just use the $sign and put the selector in brackets there. And I'm going to use the same form selector to make that more specific. And give it the context variable. Right, let's just jump back to the slides for a second. So to work out how to bind to an event and what the name of the event is to bind to, we need to check the documentation if we don't already know. There's a lot of great documentation on jQuery.com, api.jQuery.com, but my favorite website for jQuery documentation is Visual jQuery, this website here. It hasn't been updated in a few jQuery versions, but the API actually hasn't changed very much, so it pretty much still applies, even for current versions of jQuery. There's a few ways you can use it. You can type in the name of a function, and it'll look through and find it for you, or you can browse it by type here. For example, if you want to find some manipulation functions that gets or sets the text of the inside of an element, or various different CSS functions that jQuery has. We're looking at events at the moment. I was going to use the bind function, and it's got various different event types here. This particular set of documentation also documents the event helper functions. So we can call these functions directly, which is equivalent of using bind with that event name. Now blur's the one I want. The blur event fires when an element loses focus either via the pointing device or tabbing function. So what that means, if you're not familiar with the concepts of focus and blur, is that when I click on this element, that gets the focus. The element has focus. When I click out of that element, the element loses focus. So when it gets the focus, that event is focus. When it loses focus, that event is blur. And the focus goes to another element, which gets the focus event, and so on, it continues. I can also do this with the tab key. If I hit the tab key, the input element gets the blur event, and the button element will get a focus event. If I shift tab and go back, the opposite happens. The button will have a blur event, and the input will have a focus event. So here we want to bind to the blur event, and I give that a function. It doesn't need to have a parameter in this case. Now I'm just going to test that this is working. Oh, thank you. Console debug blurred. So let's go to the console. Nothing's blurred yet. If I focus it, nothing happens still. If I tab out of it, it blurred. So that's what we want. Now, when it blurs, we want to show this again. So I'm just going to copy that whole selector. If we wanted to be really picky about performance, we could store this element in a variable here. And reuse it. However, the savings and performance is pretty negligible, and this is usually easier as a starting point when you're learning jQuery. Okay, so let's show it. And it appeared. I'll do that again because I did that pretty quick. So the email element's not there. I'll type in a username, tab out of it, and the email element appears. However, since it suddenly appears and the page jumps when it does it, it's a little bit disorientating. So let's do a fade in. That's a bit better. Now it's a bit more noticeable. While we're here, let's greet John and say, "Hi, John." So to do that, I'm going to select the wrapper element. Before we move on, are there any questions?
So you probably get to, on blur, you tab down to create new user.
Yep.
Create new account, that's got focus next. But in fact, you really want to pass the focus to the email field.
Yeah. So the question was, when I tab from here, oops. When I tab from here, the focus has jumped to the button, not to the email address field. If you wanted to fix that, it's a little bit messy, but the easiest way would probably be to use the focus event. Actually, no, it wouldn't be that tricky. Let's do that. So we want to select that input element. Actually, we've already selected it here, so I think we can just do this. That should do it. Let's see what happens. Probably need to do it after fade in because it's not visible until I've called fade in. Doesn't like that. No, I won't debug it here because that could take a little while. But you would need to work out when you can call the focus function on that element, and that would give it the focus. Probably I need to put it in here, I think, is my suspicion, because it needs to do it after fade in has finished. Yeah. And if I pass a function to fade in, that will get called once fade in is done. Yeah?
How hard would it be to, instead of once you press the tab key, the email field appears, how easy would it be to, when you start typing it, then appears down?
I'm going to start typing. So we'll just need to use a different event for that.
Yep.
And the event we want is called change. There's lots and lots of different events. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's not what the session is about. But this is a really good website to discover the different events that you can use and
so
how to interact with them with jQuery. What's that?
It is possible.
Yep. I can. Yes, this is the focus event, which was about your question, and there's a change event, which I think would handle that case. We can try that really quick, but if it doesn't work, I'm not going to debug it because it could take a while. No, I want to put that in here, don't I? So that we're binding to change instead of blur. I know that with the change event, it behaves a bit differently across browsers. jQuery tries to smooth all of that out, but there's still a few quirks in there, particularly with form elements. So you'd still need to test that across all the browsers. However, Chrome behaves pretty nicely, so no, that didn't work, did it? Because we want that to appear when I start typing. Oh, on key down, that's the event you want, which is also documented there. Key down, key press, key up. There's loads of different ones, and they're all slightly different in every browser, so that's where it gets tricky. but it's definitely doable. Any other questions? Yep, okay. So remind me where I was at. What was I going to do next? Oh, we're going to say hi, John. That's right. So I want to put the message in here in between these two elements. So let's find a selector to get that. That's the username element. That's the email address element. And I'll put it after this here, form item name. So I'll put together another selector for this. Again, I'll give it the specific selector so that we don't modify things too aggressively. Actually, once we get into nested functions, we don't really need the context variable anymore. You do need it on the top level selectors, like this one here. So after that, I'm going to insert a little message. Warning. What have I done wrong? Ah, yep. Thank you. That's not the warning, though. Good catch. Thank you. I'm going to put a new line in here as well to make that a bit easier to read. Hi there. But it'd be nice if we could say hi, John. So let's see if we can do that. Now we want to select the input element. I'm going to add input here so that I know which ones are inputs and which ones are devs, because otherwise it gets a bit confusing. Hope I haven't got any of those mixed up. So we'll select. No, this one's a div, isn't it? And this is the one that we want to select to get the name. So I'm going to store the name in a variable. I think the function to get the value is val. We'll find out pretty soon if it's not. So we didn't get any message, and I've got an error down here in the console. Uncaught type error object has no method value. So it's probably not value. Let's check the documentation. I think it's val, yeah. This time we'll use api.jQuery.com. Maybe we won't. Just val, yep. This is running off a local server, so that shouldn't take any time. There we go. So it didn't break, but I forgot to put the name in the message, didn't I? In JavaScript, the plus character concatenates strings, unlike in PHP, which uses the dot character, which is awfully confusing when when you're developing front-end stuff in Drupal and always switching between PHP and JavaScript, but such it is. Yeah, so that should work. Hi there, John. Except I needed another space there. Now, if I give this strong an ID or some way that I can select it easily, I can then select it after the fact and start doing other stuff with it, like apply some CSS to it. Now, you'd probably want to do this in a style sheet in reality instead of here so that you can track all your styles together better. But sometimes you want to do something dynamically or that depends on the state of something else. So it's useful to know how to do it in jQuery too. Cool. So that's now red because I gave it the CSS. If I wanted to give it a whole bunch of CSS properties, I could pass a JavaScript object to it, which looks like this in JavaScript syntax. I know this is going to be hideous, but that's all right. Yep. It's uglier than I thought, actually. And you can use any CSS property in there. If you need to set a property which has a dash in it, I think the way to do it is like that, or you can also probably do it like that. Let's just test that. Yeah. Cool. Any questions at this point? Yeah. So do you want to wait for the mic?
So I think, as I understood, you actually had to add the particular like ID of each element within for each JavaScript, right? To make sure that actually it's focused for particular pages. Like you add sharp sign and the ID of like the nodes page and stuff for your selectors.
I could just do that, but if there's a page which has more than one item that matches this, I probably only want to do it to one of them, because there might be another form which has an email address field.
Because this JavaScript is actually loaded in all your forms, in all your Drupal pages.
Yeah, because this file is added in .info here, it's going to apply throughout the website. So anytime it matches that, it will hide it.
How can you actually make it focus for a particular page, so that only a particular page has JavaScript and CSS added?
Two ways you can do it. You can add it just for that specific page. So if you're doing it in your theme, you could add, actually I won't type it, you could add a page preprocess or a node preprocess function, and then that will give you enough context to work out whether or not you want to add that file, and then you can add it only on the pages that need it. And that's a good way to make your site more performant, because it's not loading JavaScript that it doesn't use.
Yeah.
For something small like this, the difference is pretty small, but if it's a bigger JavaScript file, or you've got a lot of JavaScript on your site already, it could make a difference.
And the second way?
The second, you could also look at the context of the page in here. For example, you could go like body, section, home, or something like that. But you
need the JavaScript
or body
here.
Is front, or something
You
like
need
that.
the JavaScript loaded here. So the first one doesn't load the JavaScript, it just checks it. And
Right,
loads.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
The first one is preferable, but you could also do it in the JavaScript file itself. The problem with using something like body here is that it won't attach to contexts that are not the full document. The reason the context variable exists is because Drupal will call your attach functions, or your behaviors functions, to attach asynchronous HTML to the page. So for example, when you upload a file using the node edit form, it doesn't do a full page refresh. It submits the file, ticks away, and then replaces part of the form. That bit of HTML it replaces in goes through Drupal attached behaviors, and it runs all of these functions on it. And when it does it with, in that case, for example, that part of the form, the context is only that part of the form, so it doesn't have a body element in it. So you have to be careful to not have too much stuff beforehand here, and be aware of the different contexts that it might come in on. For most themers, if that didn't make any sense to you, it doesn't matter. For most themers, most of the time, you don't need to worry about context, except that you need to remember to use it as the second parameter here. And that will mean that it works most of the time. And if it doesn't, you can look a bit deeper or ask someone else for help.
My question was just going to be, yeah, you answered it basically.
What's
why
the context variable?
Drupal behaviors, why you've got it there, but you've just answered the question.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, so another way of answering that question, Drupal behaviors allows Drupal to attach your JavaScript behaviors to markup that Drupal adds to the page after the page is already loaded. with dynamic HTML. Any more questions? Cool. Now, I think I changed something there that broke it. So let me just undo some undos here. That's where we're at. Okay. Cool. So you can do quite a bit with jQuery there and you know, make a lot of small, nice tweaks and enhancements to forms or other bits of your page there with what we've learned. But there's a hell of a lot more to jQuery, most of which is part of jQuery UI, which is another library that extends jQuery. So jQuery extends JavaScript, jQuery UI extends jQuery. jQuery UI is actually a collection of libraries, it's not just one. And you wouldn't want to load all of them at once because it's quite big and that would probably slow down your site quite a bit. So you want to be a bit selective about which ones you're adding when. Drupal makes that quite easy, fortunately. But before we look into that, let's go and have a look at some of the things you can do with jQuery UI. Here we go. So it has a library for draggable stuff like this. It has a library for droppable stuff like this, if my internet's working. Let's have a look at this demo while that's trying to load. It has a number of effects as well. The blind effects, clip, one of my favorites. I've never used it, but still my favorite, explode. There's another one that does that backwards, but I forget what it's called. Pulsate, I've seen that used a fair bit. Scale. So you can really get your page dancing with the effects. And let's do bounce. It's a slow bounce, but it's a bounce. Looks like you're all hogging the internet, and I can't show you the other ones. So there's a lot you can do with jQuery UI that will collect a bunch of functionality and allow you to do those sorts of things with it. Some of the others that I can't demo at the moment are droppable, resizable, selectable, and sortable. So droppable is a lot like draggable, except that it has an area where you can drop it, and it can be configured such that if you don't drop it in one of the drop zones, then it'll go back to its original spot. And then if you combine those together, you basically get sortable because there's drop zones between all the items. And if you drag an item and don't drop it between another item, then it just goes back to where it was originally. So sortable uses both of those. Resizable is it gives you a little grapple like this that lets you resize the window, but inside the browser, of course, not in the operating system. And selectable is a bit hard to explain, so I'll skip that. There's also different types of libraries here that give you full-on UI widgets, like a date picker, which you will have seen before without a doubt. Let's have a go see if we can load that one. Accordion's quite a popular one. Are you familiar with the accordion user interface pattern? Well, it implements that. And it's not loading, unfortunately. Slider, a bit like a volume slider on a sound system or something like that. Tabs you've all seen before. And a progress bar is fairly obvious. It tells you how far progressed something is. So we're going to implement sortable for fun. And what I want to do is make these blocks in the sidebar sortable so that if I try to pick one up and move it, I can reorder them here in the sidebar. Actually, before we dive into that, any questions? Nope. We'll come back to that. So to do this, I need to include the respective jQuery UI library. In Drupal 7, they're all built into Drupal 7 core, so it's as easy as calling a Drupal core API function, Drupal add library, system UI sortable. In Drupal 6, there's a contrib module which makes it similarly easy, but you have to install the module and also add in the library to it first. There's notes in the slides about that, but since you all should be using Drupal 7 and we're starting to run out of time, let's just move on to this. So I'm going to create a new behaviors function because the setter functionality is not related to the one with the form. So I'll keep them in separate behaviors. So this is the same pattern that we saw before. So this is the bit that you can copy and paste and reuse throughout Drupal 7 themes to get you started. And just remember to change the name here so it's something unique. And then you put your custom functionality here. So I need to select the parent element for the items that I want to be sortable. So that's going to be the region in this case. So if we've got a block title, here we've got a block, here's another block, and then here's the region that contains them all. So I'm going to use this class to select it because that's unique. Region will get all regions on the page. And need to remember to give it the context variable here. And then it's as easy as calling sortable. I'm using a plugin for TextMate, which I think it's called Lint, which tells me if I have any potential errors in my JavaScript. Because I had an extra comma at the end of this object, it's telling me that there's a problem with this file. In PHP, you can have commas at the end of an array like that. In JavaScript, in theory, you can as well, but IE6 doesn't like it, or IE7, I think. So that's a common gotcha to look out for. Okay, so let's see if our sortable is working. Oh, look at that. So I'll just grab that block. I can move it around. I can't drop it over here, or I can, but it ends up falling back into the region. Now, of course, this is only in the browser. It's not getting saved back to the server. That's well out of the scope of this session. But you can, see potential there for a whole lot of things. Now, one thing that's weird about this is that the cursor is stuck on the mouse cursor is stuck on this text icon. And the other thing that's weird is that I can grab this link and drag the whole thing by that. So two quick things I'll demo with this is I'm going to set the handle. Now the documentation for this is, I can't show you the documentation, but it's on the jQuery website. On those demo pages, the documentation's right there. So you're going to have to trust me that the way to do this is to set the handle property. And I'm going to give it a title class as well, because Drupal block titles have a title class. So now I can't click and drag by the body of a block, but I can still click and drag by the title of a block. So that's great. But the other thing we want to do here is make the title, the mouse cursor icon change to something so that you actually realize that you can move it. Now UI sortable jQuery UI sortable library conveniently gives us this class. So I'm just going to use that, and it's the titles that we want to change the mouse cursor on. And I think there's a mouse cursor called move. Let's get some suggestions. Move, yeah, that's the one we want. There we go. Cool. Any questions at that point? Nope. Out of time. So yeah, there's a Drupal 6 module which makes it easy to add jQuery UI to the page. It's called jQuery_UI. There's documentation on the page about how to add it, so I'll skip over that. And we've actually done all of that. The last thing is accessibility. If you're modifying the markup on the page in order to make it easier to write your jQuery, think again. That's the rule of thumb. See if there's a way you can do it without modifying the default markup. If you're writing custom markup, make sure it works perfectly without your jQuery before you start writing it. And if you changed it after you've added the jQuery already, turn JavaScript off and check the page still works. That way you can make sure that the page will still be accessible to screen readers, robots that visit your website, vision impaired users, and all of those sorts of things. There's a lot of other techniques you can use to test accessibility, but if you're writing jQuery, that's the essence of it. It needs to work without JavaScript as well. This is just a list of links, if you didn't catch them before, where you can get some of those resources that I mentioned. And yeah, that's us. This is my daughter, Anna Sophia, the Drupal baby that Dimitri made reference to before. She's 7 months old now, but she was about 2 weeks old in this photo. And she's actually on a Drupal beanbag. This is the eye of it. And she has a Drupal, a knitted Drupalicon rattle, and a Drupalicon beanie too, which I brought with me. Which unfortunately she's grown out of. But any other questions? Yep. Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
Do you think jQuery UI is going to be the future of the Drupal 8.x sort of admin interface?
If I think jQuery UI will be the future of the Drupal 8 admin interface.
Just the way that you sort of drag and drop and...
Yep. So jQuery UI is already used very heavily in Drupal 7 and even 6 and sorry, not 6 because it's not there. In Drupal 7 admin interfaces. And I imagine they'll continue to use it and hopefully keep up with the latest jQuery versions as well. Does that answer your question? Yep. Yep.
This might be a stupid question, but that's just me. The code that you were writing all before, where is that getting written to? Is that inside a module, or is that?
It's in a custom theme called, I'll show you the site directory actually. I meant to do that, but I forgot. Yep. Okay, sure. Well, yeah, it's there. Okay, thanks very much.